start, as we always do, with our mission statement. The New Philadelphia City Schools will provide all students the opportunity to achieve their highest potential to become educated, self-sufficient, and responsible citizens. We are committed to providing every student a diverse, quality education within a safe and secure environment through a dedicated, innovative, and highly qualified staff in partnership with parents and the community at large. This is the metric we measure our decisions against. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Mr. France?
Present.
Dr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. Galentine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Oath of office for Mr. McMath, please. Sorry.
Can you please stand?
Yeah.
Huh? Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Todd McMath,
I, Todd McMath,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and the Constitution of the State of Ohio,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
will faithfully and impartially
discharge my duties as a member of the New Philadelphia Board of Education
discharge my duties as a member of the New Philadelphia Board of Education
in and for the said New Philadelphia City School District
in and for the said New Philadelphia City School District
of Tuscarawas County, Ohio,
of Tuscarawas County, Ohio,
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
and in accordance with the laws
and in accordance with the laws
now in effect and hereafter to be enacted.
now in effect and hereafter to be enacted.
During my continuance in said office
During my continuance in said office
and until my successor is chosen and qualified.
and until my successor is chosen and qualified.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, election of officers. Any member of the board may nominate someone for office. Members may nominate themselves. It should be noted that nominations do not require seconds. If more than one person is nominated for the position, the treasurer shall publicly call the roll of the board. Secret ballots would be in violation of the Sunshine Law. Ohio law requires a majority vote of all members of the board to elect an officer. I'd open the floor for nominations for president. Dr. Fuller?
I would like to nominate David France, of whom you may have heard.
I have. Are there any other nominations for president? Close the nominations. Please call the roll.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Galentine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. France abstains.
Abstain. Thank you for your
Motion
confidence. I will do my best to appropriately represent the district, and I guess I got to move now.
Oh, I didn't know you had to
It's
move.
been a pleasure sitting on the left with you, Dr. Fuller. Okay. Now open the floor for nominations for vice president.
I'd like to nominate Ms. Weaver, Vice President, please.
Are there any other nominations? Close the nominations. Please call the roll.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Galentine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver abstains. Motion carries.
Okay. Committee assignments. Please speak up if you're opposed to any of these, would like to change something you're on. I would recommend we keep the park board the same with Mr. Galentine and Mr. France. I talked with Mr. McMath earlier this evening, and he's agreed to represent the New Philadelphia Board of Education on the Buckeye Career Center Board of Education. You're good with that, Todd?
Yep.
Terrific. I'd also like to ask Mr. McMath to be the legislative liaison for the Board of Education. You would get legal updates and stuff like that from the OSBA and ODE, and then it's not a very time-consuming or thing. We just need to have one. I would suggest that we keep Dr. Fuller as the student achievement liaison, Mr. Weaver as our representative to the Quaker Foundation, Dr. Fuller as our representative to the Quaker Digital Academy Foundation. Remain with Mr. Galantine and Mr. France for the Policy Committee. Mr. McMath and Mr. France for the Facilities Committee. Mr. Weaver for the Insurance Committee. The Evaluation Committee, Mr. Weaver and Dr. Fuller. Strategic Planning, which was previously Quaker Compass. I'd ask Mr. Weaver and Mr. Galantine to represent the board on that. And our OSBA delegate remain as Mr. Galantine, with Mr. McMath being the alternate. Everybody good with that? Wonderful. Do we have a motion to accept those appointments as presented?
I move.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller? Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Secretary to the board and treasurer, take care of the next resolution, please.
The following resolution is to set the meeting dates for, as listed. There typically are normal meeting dates. February 14th is moved back 1 week due to the holiday on February 21st. Item B is to establish the fund for the board at $15,000. Item C is to authorize the treasurer to pay bills as they are presented and transfer within the general fund, and to report monthly those bills that were paid. Item D is a resolution to authorize the purchase of faithful performance bonds, $20,000 for each, the board president and superintendent, and $40,000 for the treasurer. Item E is to authorize the treasurer and superintendent to attend professional meetings and travel on school business. Item F is the authorization for the treasurer to request advance payments of tax revenue from the county auditor. Item G is the authorization for the treasurer to invest in available inactive and interim funds in accordance to revised code 135.142. Item H is to designate the Times Reporter as our official newspaper to place legal ads. Item I is board compensation set at $40 a month, no more than 12 meetings a year. Item J is to set Mr. Jeff Williams to serve as the interim superintendent in the absence of Superintendent Wentworth. Item K is to authorize the superintendent to employ subs and temporary personnel as needed. Such employment will be presented to the board for approval at its next meeting. Item L is the board utilizes the legal services of Pebble and Wagner. Item M, the Board of Education appoints the superintendent as the hearing officer for student discipline matters. Item N, the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent to accept resignations. Item O, the Board of Education appoints the superintendent as the representative to the Ohio High School Athletic Associations for matters including but not limited to student transfers. And item P, the Board of Education, in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code, and appoints the treasurer as the board's official designee for public records.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
For clarification, Item D. You're bonded for $1,000 and $40,000 respectively. The cost of the bond is not $20,000 or $40,000.
Cost of that bond's like $100
Okay,
each.
just
That's two
so
bonds.
we're not paying $20,000
No,
for,
it's $100.
Okay.
And what that is mine's higher, but it's for the maximum amount of carrying cash to the bank.
okay. Please call are there any more questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Carries.
Motion to adjourn. And a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Call the next meeting to order. Consistency is always good. The New Philadelphia City Schools will provide all students the opportunity to achieve their highest potential to become educated, self-sufficient, and responsible citizens. We are committed to providing every student a diverse, quality education within a safe and secure environment through a dedicated, innovative, and highly qualified staff in partnership with parents and the community at large. This is the mission statement of the New Philadelphia Board of Education. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. France?
Present.
Dr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. Galantine? Mr. McMath? Mr. Weaver?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Motion to approve the agenda
Just getting out of chair.
and a second.
Second.
Math. Any discussion, additions, deletions, anything? Please call the roll.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I have a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting dated December 20th, 2021.
I'll move.
Mr. Galantine, and a second.
Second.
Dr. Fuller. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we have public participation?
Yes, we do.
Ms. Jennifer Flannery? Flaherty, I'm sorry, I apologize.
My name is Jennifer Flaherty. I live at 320 Madison Street in Dover. And I'm here tonight to I sub for Philly, like you all know, done it for 7 years. Love doing it. Love being with kids. Love being with kids with special needs. It's what I love. Back in August, Marie Contini, or that's not her last name, Martini, sorry about that, had asked me to sub for her while she went out on knee surgery. I said, okay, I can do that. She changed her date once or twice because of COVID and the hospital rules and all that kind of stuff. So she came back to me mid-September and said, okay, I did it because she knew I go on vacation every year at Thanksgiving. Done it for years, whatever. She knew that. She scheduled that for after I got back from vacation. She wanted me to sub for her because she knows I know the building, I know the school, I know Mrs. Reed, I know a lot of the students. So I agreed to do that. Many of you know that I have a son with special needs that cannot be left alone for 5 minutes by himself. So to rearrange a schedule for me to sub every day takes a lot of prep on my end. But I was willing to do it. I wanted to do it. I love being at Central. Loved when Mr. Zupa was there. Loved that Carl's there. So with some arrangements, I got that all done. Came back. I was at Disney World. Mrs. Reed called me. Said, Jen, we don't need you to sub for Marie. We've hired somebody. And I said, wow. I didn't even see it was posted. I didn't even know that, I didn't know what. So she said, but I got a subbing job for you to be in Mrs. Richardson's room because they hired Lee Hamry to be secretary. Lee is a wonderful girl. She's going to do a wonderful job. This has nothing to do with her. She's going to be an absolutely awesome secretary. Will you sub in Mrs. Richardson's room? I said, okay, but unfortunately I can't till after Christmas break because I'd made all my appointments before Christmas so I would have to take time off to sub. So I said, so every day is pretty much booked the week before Christmas break. She said, okay, how about after Christmas break? Okay, I can do that. I said, but I'll guarantee you that job in Mrs. Richardson's room probably won't be open because anybody in their right mind that's struggling in a unit classroom and looking for a different way out would want to work with Lori Richardson. Amazing teacher, amazing. So within, someone's gonna want that job because they're gonna wanna work with her. She's like, oh, I don't know, but we'll see. So during break, I find out that they hired somebody for Mrs. Richardson's room. Okay, not another subbing job. No phone call for Mrs. Reed to say that they'd hired somebody. Didn't know if I was supposed to go back to work or not after Christmas break. I did talk to Mr. Williams. I called Mr. Williams and expressed my concern. He confirmed to me that they were hiring somebody. So I was like, okay. So the more I thought about it, I really took it personally. I really took it. I took it to heart. I love to work with kids. I love to work for Philly. But it just took me so hard, just so hard. So I couldn't get it off my heart. So I decided to email a couple of the board members to tell them. Thought maybe that would help me, get it off. Write it down, make you feel better. So I wrote those two board members, they both respond, appreciate that, but it's still on my heart. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, and I expressed to Mr. Williams, this isn't against me because I stood up and asked the board for a raise, is it? He's like, no, Jen, no, don't think of it that way. It's strategy, Marie's gonna be gone, they wanted to hire somebody to get in there to get her started. Jeff did a very good job at making sure that it was all not legal, but it was all good for the district. And I said, I know, but how can you ask somebody to sub for 6 weeks and a 30-second phone call be done? Sorry, got nothing else for you, except for the 6 o'clock phone calls in the morning to sub. I understand that's what my job is, to get the 6 o'clock phone call. But I was prepared not to get that 6 o'clock phone call for 6 weeks. And then my understanding is Marie's coming back for 2 weeks before she goes, and before she retires. So then I was thinking, how in a district can we pay a secretary, 2 secretaries for 1 elementary school? How is that right? I mean, I don't know what the pay difference is between the secretary and the aide. I'm thinking it's around $5 or so. But 5 times 40 times 4 weeks times 6 weeks that she's going to be gone, and then 2 weeks when she comes back, that school's going to have 2 secretaries that we're paying. And I don't know. I understand it, that they wanted to train her and get her, because I know the secretary is a big responsibility, I know that. But that could have been done the 2 weeks that she comes back from her surgery. And I want to hope in my heart that it wasn't against me asking for a raise. I want to hope that in my heart, that's not the reason why. But I just needed to tell everybody. You know, I haven't gone back to subbing for Philly, and I've been called almost every day. I don't know that I will, because it hurt. I had somebody from a different district call me, offer me a little more money, a little more drive, but would appreciate everything I did for them. And told them about my situation. He said he was sorry that that had happened to me, and that he'd hoped that it wouldn't happen in their district. So I had somebody from a different district know that I love kids and ask me that. So that made, I know it's not, oh, the poor Jenny show, because that's not what I wanted it to be at all. But I think like this, if you're treating somebody that knows a lot of rights and wrongs, how is somebody getting treated that doesn't know those rights and wrongs? And I want to hope that there isn't anybody other than me that that's happened to. But like I said, I just needed to share it with you all. I don't expect any answers. I don't expect any comments. I just hope that this was a learning lesson and that it doesn't happen to somebody else. Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, and it's certainly unfortunate that you feel as you do. I would share with you that you're coming to the meeting and speaking about the pay rate, which it kind of sounds to me like is weighing on you quite a bit, was more of a catalyst that we needed to keep the change we had discussed several times when we talked about attracting and retaining high-quality folks to work in the district. And it consistently came up that, well, we need to pay them a little bit more. And right comment, right place, right time. And I feel bad that you feel the way you do. I understand why you might feel that way, and you can take it or leave it. You don't have to believe me. The reality is that was a catalyst that got the ball rolling. And certainly a change in administration's perspective on those kinds of things helped it progress a little bit also. But there certainly isn't any, at least from this body, negative repercussions because you came and realistically, quite frankly, helped us get something accomplished that we've been trying to do for a little bit. I mean, I feel like I'm accurately representing what took place amongst the board, and if you don't think I am, please speak up. But sure. Okay, well, thank you. We will now move on to the treasurer's report.
Okay, in your folder, I provided the financial statement, the key indicator, the cash flow, the check register, QDA's financial report, QPA's financial report, and the bank reconciliation. Hopefully you've reviewed all of the QDA and QPA financial reports. That's a requirement to be the sponsor. And as always, everything is in balance. The last item I have, my section is very short tonight. I have an approval for FMLA for one employee beginning approximately April 4th.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll move.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes,
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
We have a quorum. Oh, sorry. Motion carries.
We do have a quorum. You're accurate. Personnel.
We have a few items here on personnel. The first one under classified was just giving Michelle Hudas in the treasurer's office a more accurate job title. We really made that move in December with the restructuring of the treasurer's office and Denise's retirement. Speaking of retirement, I do want to draw your attention to the retirement of Patty Hostetler later this spring. That is going to be a real loss for the district. She's been in the district for a long time and has served multiple roles. So we're going to wish her well, but I keep telling her she's not allowed to leave. So at any rate, there are a handful of supplementals there, most of them for spring sports, couple volunteers, and both regular and athletic. And notice 2 more substitute teachers that we are approving. We continue to get applications for substitute teachers, and while we are still below the percentage of fill rate that we would like to be, we are seeing some improvement. So we're thankful that we're continuing to draw some more people that are interested in that position. So with that, if I could have a motion to approve.
So moved.
second.
Any questions for Ms. Wentworth? Please call the roll.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes,
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Anything from Business Advisory Council?
They have not met since the last meeting. This will be an ongoing link, though. Again, we are in a consortium with the ESC, multiple districts, work through them for the Business Advisory Council. So that is an active link. If you're in the actual document, it will take you to the ESC's website where they'll have all the minutes. I ask that you review those on a regular basis, but I will alert you when they meet and have some new information there as well.
Okay. The big item, all around big item from the Facilities Committee is the HVAC project for the gymnasium wing in the high school. And you all should have got an informative email before this evening about what we discussed and the decisions that we're going to have to make moving forward. And just to kind of review some of that, several years ago, when we started this process of developing a plan to maintain the HVAC systems in our district, the estimate was $1.3 million to upgrade the boilers in the gymnasium wing. And between then and now, that cost alone has went from 1.3 million to 1.8 million. I apologize, I don't have my notes in front of me right now. I'm kind of going off the top of my head, but it's fairly accurate. A lot of that was within the last, 18 months. The cost of labor and materials for that type of a project has increased by approximately 30%, which puts us at 1.8 to replace the steam boiler system with a warm water boiler system in the gymnasium, the choir room, and the band room. It needs to be done. That area's been leaking for years. We're fortunate to have the opportunity to replace it. An option that we have is to air condition those 3 areas for somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. The $400,000 to $500,000 will essentially use up all of the ESSER 3 money. We're within $500,000 when we get done doing the boiler project that has to be done. So we're hoping, we can get everybody to agree that the 1.8 for the boiler has to be done. We're going to go ahead and present that to the board as soon as we can. And then the question becomes, do we add the air conditioning to it or not? Some of the things that we considered were that we will have the contractor told us an estimate to air condition with mini splits the third floor of Weldy and the high school at a cost of $1.5 million. And so we don't have the money to do all of the rooms on the third floor of the high school or middle school. They told us to properly air condition the elementaries that are not air conditioned, just based on what our buildings look like and the age of them, to figure between $5,000 and $10,000 per classroom. Again, with mini splits upgrade, and there's clearly not enough money to do that. So the question that the facilities committee discussed was, is it reasonable to put $500,000 into air conditioning for that particular part of the school, the high school? Certainly everybody would like to have air conditioning in there where they work. I have a bad habit of not putting my air conditioner in my window in my office at work because I'll spend all my time in there as opposed to going out and working where it's hot. So I can't pay the bills if I don't work. Anyway, that's another topic. Something that we took away that we felt like we could accurately glean from the bond issue that we went through a few years ago was that whether you were for the bond or against the bond to build a new school, across the board, it seemed that everybody agreed on we got to keep that gym, which made us feel like that gym, whether we have an opportunity to rebuild there on that spot, if we rebuild someplace else, it's highly likely that that gymnasium and those two rooms, the band room and the choir room, are going to be there for, I don't know, Trent, you're the facilities guy, 20, 30, just depends on how well we take care of them and what kind of use they're getting. That would be long-term, that facility we believe has long-term use to it for kids. Is what something we would throw up for consideration to the board. The other thing, I'm going to let Julie go over here, how that if we were to rebuild on the same site and the money that we put into this system can be, I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm going to let you address
So-
the financial end of it.
When you go into an OFCC project, they give you your money based on your number of students and then the square foot of build, and then they start to break it out by area. For example, they'll say a preschool or a kindergarten is 1,200 square foot room, a regular room is 900 square feet, and they go through and determine how many rooms you need. They say you get one gym for this number of students, you get another gym for this number of students. When they break all that down, if we're not using that gym, they'll take and they'll reallocate that to other areas as long as it's within our student count and student cost. So the reduction should be used against the LFI that we would have to raise to get there. And when we talked to the engineers, we clarified that. The engineers agreed with that strategy, that it would be a good spend. And I actually said to them, is this what you would do with this building, or would you do the mini splits? And they said, by all means, it's cheaper to add that air conditioning now than it is later. And if you go into a master plan, you're going to benefit from doing that.
And
Does
we
that make sense?
are also replacing the roof. We have to replace the roof on the gym. Certainly much better to build the roof around an HVAC unit than it would be to cut a hole in a practically brand-new roof to put air conditioning units in at a later date. And do I remember correctly, Julie, that the energy efficiency aspect of the type of units they're recommending helps us get them qualified for the
It's part
credit?
of the green qualification.
LEED silver, something?
Yeah, to get to your lead points. However, that has to be in so many years, so that's not necessarily a guarantee on the lead points. Because if you don't build within so many years, that's not counted for your lead.
But didn't they also indicate, help me refresh my memory here, that anything we put in to air condition individual classrooms would not qualify for any kind
No.
of credit.
Because if you put that in individual classrooms, the one thing that we're missing now, and these engineers have been all through our buildings, the one thing that we're missing is there's a vent that has to go in order to get your LEED credits. And what we had discussed for installing these mini splits did not include those vents, and that drastically increases the cost of the building project. So yeah, the only way to get any LEED credit on any of that would be to put the vents in. And he said the mini splits probably would not be approved in the plan anyways. It would be taken out. So it, you wouldn't get to keep those, even if you spent that money.
Fresh air. The many splits didn't offer the fresh air that they
Yes,
qualify for.
yes.
And that is a lot to digest.
So you don't think that with the $400,000 to $500,000 left in that this ESSER money, the three, right? There's any way that we can do third floor or anything AC with that amount?
Oh, you're looking at 1.5 for the high school only. Trent's estimate.
Is it the high school only or the high school, middle school, the whole
High school,
complex?
middle school complex.
Okay.
When we talked to the engineers, he kept saying the high school building because he considered that all one building, but he meant the high school, middle school.
And the primary driver for that cost is what?
Well, you have to update the electric. Our electric isn't there in that building at all to handle that. You would have to put in the mini splits and installation, and see installation also with ESSER would have to be prevailing wage. He said at a minimum, you're looking at $1.5 million just to do that building. So no, we don't have the money in ESSER to make that happen.
Each room in that system would have its own unit on the roof, correct?
There's different ways they can do it, depends on which, you can do it like one unit for like 8 rooms, or you can do one that splits between 2 rooms. The condensing unit is separate, and then they'll have different, like the, inside the room itself will be pulling off those condensing units. Depends on, it only equals out either between $5,000 and $10,000 per room, but that's just for the unit itself. There's, the way I explained, they can have, get the bigger units that would have a bigger condenser that would supply more rooms, if you want to do it that way.
If the roof would support the weight of the unit.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
If the roof, I mean, the first thing they'd have to do is check the engineering on the actual structure to make sure how big of a unit. They don't even know for sure they could put a 10-room unit on the roof that it wouldn't.
Yeah, that's structurally, that was the other thing he said. He said, we haven't even scratched the surface on structural.
Yeah. And that was one of the things we wanted to know, Todd, was what can we do to, what are our options? That's what, when we first got this information back, the question was, what are we compromising? What are we sacrificing to air condition the gym, the choir room, and the band room? And it just doesn't, we can't come up with a path.
So he also said that in the proposed plan, if we didn't do air conditioning now, the gym, they could leave a coil open and they can install that coil later to add air conditioning. But the other 2 rooms, those whole units, after we paid for all that money, would have to be removed and get all new equipment, because you couldn't just replace the coil in those 2 units.
To spin off of Todd's question, just make sure I'm clear. I will say $500,000, $500,000 to do the gym, choir, and band. Am I correct? If we wanted to do, if we had the money, if we wanted to do everything up there, the middle school, the high school, band room, choir room, everything, that would be 1.5 million.
If we wanted to do all of the rooms,
Everything.
that would exclude the choir, the band, and the gym.
The 1.5 is just for the 3rd floor.
That's just the 3rd floor.
Oh, it's just the third
You'd have
floor.
to add the other 400 to 500 to do everything.
Okay,
He was
so
asking what would the total bill be? 2 million.
2 million to do everything.
2 million would,
Oh, am I wrong, Amy?
right, that would, the 2 million would air condition in theory, 2 million would air condition gym, choir, band in the third floor of the high school.
Not the first and second floors. Okay, I need to have that clear, because I thought going Ned's, if, it sounds easy to say, so it's not my money, in a sense. I was just thinking, if it's 1.5 million to do everything, both buildings, shoot, we should,
I think we'd be telling you we need to figure out how we.
way to do it. That's exactly, figure out a way to do that, is what I was saying.
But,
No, that's not the case.
and certainly, I mean, the air conditioning on the third floor would make, I would assume, just the physics of it would have to make the second floor a little more comfortable. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, but.
Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how thick that's a big, tall ceiling in there. There's thick, I don't know. That would be a question for the engineers. And I guess, here's where it gets hairy, not hairy, but a little uneasy, is that the engineers are concerned, the facilities committee is concerned, when's the next shoe going to drop on this inflation part of labor and parts? And we'd really, if Julie and Amy and Trent can get some solid information from Gardner, it's likely that if we can address the questions we're having tonight, this is why I wanted to bring it up tonight so we could have discussion about it. We may have to call a special meeting. It may be best for the district for us to call a special meeting as soon as we have accurate numbers, get this passed. So first of all, we can avoid another price increase. And secondly, just to get us on the schedule to where that we can get this all done when there's, that's another big part of being a school, is we can't have anybody in the building when they're working on the roof like that. So we need to do that over the summer.
So
And it shuts the gym down a minimum of what was it, Trent? 6 weeks?
It's gonna be a month to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And we know for sure that the structure of the roof of the high school will accommodate the new units there?
The gym,
Yeah, the gym.
that's what they've said.
Yes, they've already checked that out.
Okay, that's
As
good.
part of the engineering on the phase 3 of the boiler project, they've checked the structure because we originally talked about an internal mount. And then we decided to do an external mount for the air handlers.
Right now, those air handlers are up. If you've been there, they're tucked up in like a catwalk area. Those will be coming down, we'll be doing on the rooftop for many reasons. Accessibility is one of them. Anytime they gotta do any kind of work to them, instead of putting up in the catwalks and all. But that's what everyone, even way back to the original plan, that they was gonna put them on the rooftop versus being hanging from the catwalk above.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
They've already decided, they've already did the engineering analysis and everything on what was gonna take for that roof to support that.
It was beneficial that the structure was originally designed to carry a load like that with the suspended units. And we're just kind of changing the location of the load to put them up on the roof. Whereas the high school wasn't, I guess I'm not so sure how they did that when the fire happened, but I don't think anybody was planning on putting air conditioners up there when they rebuilt that.
No, the places that have the air handlers in the high school were, that was the intent. But the other areas, the structural wasn't made that way. Our electricity isn't there. We don't have any venting. I mean, there's all kinds of issues with trying to do it in the high school.
So, and this is a very green and new question maybe, but I know we have my kids have said we have window units in some rooms, right? Can we not put window units in more rooms? Second floor, third floor, central?
We don't have the electricity to carry it. The plugs aren't all the correct.
The size of the wire is not quite what it should be. The electrical engineering in those buildings wasn't done to accommodate that kind of amperage, especially when you combine it with plugging in big banks of laptops, refrigerators, Keurigs, whatever. Trent tries to make sure that, interior walled rooms has air conditioning.
Balcony windows and.
Some of the rooms that have special needs kids that the temperature affects their overall well-being, we try to get those rooms air conditioned.
Mrs. Conrad's special needs room, it's got air conditioning for their, special needs, there's children there, there's been children there that can't regulate their own body temperatures, and it's a big difference, keeping them comfortable, because, when it as the temperature escalates, so there's sometimes the behavior is a little hard, it's hard for them to control their, emotions when it gets warm and then like that. That's pretty important that we take care of those special needs. I think any special needs room we have in the district, we've got that covered. Just for that sole purpose of making sure our special needs children are taken care of for their special needs.
Isn't there air conditioning in the rooms that face those, I don't know what I want to call them, there's like it's not a tower, it's a hole in the middle of it, you know what I'm talking about, that shafts. There's those rooms that face the shafts that there's no airflow in, that some of those have air conditioning in them. It's just kind of trying to make sure if you don't have airflow, we're doing something to address the air quality.
Do we have any idea of cost to upgrade electric for that?
No.
I just know it makes a big difference.
Yeah, we don't right now. We can look into that. I believe.
I would be very curious to see what that would be.
I believe that when it was looked into before, it was like what you guys know from when Steve was here, wasn't it? Not Steve Shear, but Steve Jenkins was on the board. He was very interested in getting it. I believe the upgrade was $900,000.
Yeah, it has been looked at before. It's a good question. I mean, and it does make sense to probably have something that's updated, right? That's my recollection, too, is in the $1 million range to do that. But
So
several years ago, I mean, it's what it is today.
is that something Gardner would provide us with, or something we go to GPD for?
Well, Verosco is the HVAC engineer that's been on the project, and they've scoped out all of our buildings. They have worked both with Gardner and with GPD. All they engineer is HVAC projects.
So are we good with having Julie and Trent try to get somebody, whoever it is, to tell us what it's going to cost to evaluate our electrical system?
Yeah.
I mean, is it 10 grand? Is it 50 grand? I don't have any idea.
Yeah.
What's it going to cost us to find out an actual answer to that question? And then are we just asking that question for the third floor? Is it the entire building? Is it any building that doesn't have air conditioning in it in the district? What's our scope there, do you think?
I would say second and third floors.
What about like central, east,
West.
west? I'd have a hard time investigating it for 2 and 3 at the high school, middle school, and not those other places that don't have it.
I think it's why. Just, hey, nothing else, find out what the cost is.
Yep. What's it going to cost to have it evaluated? Because they're not going to do it for free. Okay. So we're getting maybe that kind of information next month?
I would love to know that, yeah.
I think that would be good, because even that amount that you've referenced to, I'm not sure if that was just the electrical work or if that was to air condition that building. I don't remember. I just remember when we looked into air conditioning, that was the dollar amount that came to mind. So maybe that just what's involved with all that. But go ahead, Trent.
We're looking for an upgrade to support window units, is that what we're looking at?
That's what I would be curious about, yes.
So we just need to understand what it's gonna take to get, 20 amp runs maybe to every room so we can support the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Is that what the scope here is, all that, just wanna understand.
So what do we do if the cost comes in on this project? Because I gotta tell you, here's the problem. If we don't get it approved when it comes in and we push it out further, we might not be in the timeline to get the job done this summer. And we can't be doing the job in August and when kids are coming back.
Well, how quickly do you think something like that could be?
I can ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just kind of keep us posted.
Okay.
I mean, I understand that we're in a time crunch on it for sure, but.
But are they dependent upon each other?
Well, if you want to do one, we don't have the money for the other.
Right, but if, I mean, they
That's the-
said that it was 1.5 million for the third floor.
That was just to do installation, the mini splits, and upgrade the electric. That wasn't to do any of the other, correct?
Are we like, are we holding off on phase 3? Do that?
No, we're going to talk to them and see how quickly they can get that information so we can report back out.
What kind of liability do we have with a window air conditioner hanging 36 feet in the air with kids right outside of it?
It's also kind of scary.
They have portable ones too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen those. I've got one of those in my garage. It doesn't work the greatest. I think there's one in the boardroom upstairs. Isn't there one of those?
It's not there anymore. We took it to put it in, the one teacher over at the high school because that one unit went out over there for they had one had one teacher that had disability we had to cover. We used it over there to cover that area for the meantime. And we had to use them. They're not, they do okay. They're not quite as effective as the window unit. We also have to not just consider, we got to consider the cost overall of the, not just installing these items, but what we want to do, our utilities, bills,
Yeah, sure.
the budget there, because they will spike. We have to figure all that out too. Is it, I mean, I'm not trying to, we have to look at all of it so we don't get into, okay, this is great, now how we're paying for this. We have to make sure we've got the total cost of running those units covered too, because at the end of the day, that's gonna come out of the budget, that's not gonna be.
Yeah.
Something we have to look at overall, how it's going to impact that. So if I understand correctly, we're going to look at upgrading electric to be able to support.
We want to see what it's going to cost to investigate that.
Okay.
What's it going to cost to get an engineer to come in and tell us it's going to cost you $20, $20,000, $200,000, whatever, to just upgrade the electric? And then we'll figure out the safety and expense of all that stuff if we want to move forward, if we think we need to.
What's the timeframe on using the ESSER funds?
Oh, ESSER themselves are 2024.
Okay, so we could do what's needed with the project that we have at play. That's the 1.3, that's already moved up to 1.8 just with the inflationary pressure and may likely go up. Could we still commit to doing that? And this 400 to 500 that's being right now looked at as, hey, this might be the best way to utilize those funds is to invest in the air conditioning for the rooms that we're kind of talking about. Sounds like could we move forward with the first part and then keep that other part open to look at the, additional opportunity, or are those two projects tied together?
Well, adding the air or not adding the air is kind of tied together because of those air handlers in the choir and the band room,
Okay.
because the coils, the whole air handler has to be replaced versus just replacing the coils in those
Okay.
two areas.
Gotcha, okay. Just thinking about the time, the urgency with making a decision if we had any opportunity to delay part, but we don't. What we're kind of saying.
It's kind of tight.
Okay.
Well, question two is, we've been very fortunate to get these ESSER funds, and we've been able to do some tremendous things, boilers, et cetera, which I'm assuming at least some of those things would have been out of permanent improvement. Should be pretty solvent.
We would have never had the money to do all this.
We saw a lot of this coming and we're kind of wondering, how in the heck are we going to pay for all of this?
Okay.
And
We have a whole nother project list.
It-
We haven't even touched.
You're right, Danny, we were terribly fortunate. And that was the talk, was how are we going to afford this? Because it's this big train rolling down the tracks. And I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that Trent and some of the folks that work with him in the maintenance department were literally buying antique air-operated valves on eBay to try to get Mr. Magoni's classroom warm, or whatever they were doing. And it's just to where that you can't even, it's bad.
So if you remember during the bond issue when GPD was talking about the master plan and they said we needed about 11.5 million of upgrades.
Right.
This is part of that project. The boilers were part of all that. Without that, we wouldn't have, because our PI money is $400,000 a year. We get a bus out of there, there's 100,000, that leaves us at 3. And then some of that has to be used for other necessary things. We don't have that kind of cash to do that. That's why the need for the building project to begin with.
Yeah, we could always, this will get me beat up outside. We could always look at, down the road, some of these projects we're looking at and saying, hey, how much would it cost to get a permanent improvement bill on the levy? You put a levy on.
Well, and we could do that, but that's where, what the board needs to do is be proactive and say, okay, what is more important to this board? Is it to do individual levies like that? For, you go out for a levy, you're looking at $4 million maybe in a levy? Or is it more prudent to wait and discuss a master plan? Because either way, you're spending the public's money.
I feel like that's going to be one of the biggest tasks in front of this group now that the new board is seated, is we need to figure out what we would like the district to look like in 5 years, 7 years, and 10 years.
I agree.
And there's 17 and a half different ways for us to get to year 10.
Yeah.
And we need to kind of pick one. And this is the kind of information we need to have, I think, to pick a path.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Todd's idea of what's going to cost, find out how much it would cost to put electrical, in the middle school, high school. Then we know, is that something we want to put in our master plan? Or are we looking at, no, I want to build a new building somewhere else?
Long-term thing. I mean, we were talking just a little bit ago about, even with the bond, how long that process, how long ago it started. So the buildings we have are the buildings we have. So what do we have to do for them?
I from what, they told us the last time, if we chose to go down the path of another bond issue, we're a good 4 to 5 years from anything changing.
Right.
It takes about 18 months to do your, go out to the public and then start the process of the plans before you can even go to bid.
Well, we got a good start on tonight.
Yep.
Good start on tonight.
We'll keep everybody posted on what's going on and try to figure out if we need to have a special meeting or not.
Were you going to offer something, John? I saw you had your hand
I just
raised.
have a question, if I may. Just inquiring, again, John Zukel, 433 North Broadway in New Philly. Just inquiring as to which of our elementaries are now air conditioned. I think it's South is air conditioned. Are any of the others at this point in time air conditioned?
None of them have central air conditioning. There are window units in several classrooms in York. It was a PTO project at some point. And I think there's the odd room and occasional room in other buildings that's air conditioned, but South is the only building that's fully air conditioned. Correct me if I say something wrong, Trent.
Right, that's right.
That's correct.
When considering that, just to clarify, Julie, if I heard you correctly, that the cost for air conditioning a 2 or 3 story building per room would be the same price that you would pay for a single story facility?
No, the cost for the 3rd floor at the high school and middle school, so that's both 3rd floors, is estimated to be $1.5 million, and that's just mini splits.
You were talking about the Ohio Facilities Commission determining the cost at a rate per classroom per building size.
Oh, what I said was what they take a square foot cost of construction. Now, I will tell you, this is years ago. I've been here 6 years. When I was in the construction project out at Brown Local, it was $245 a square foot then. So you're looking at 9 years ago. I don't know what it is today per square foot. I know that's how they do their calculations. Unless they've changed that, I don't believe they have, because I spoke to the bonding attorney when we were looking at our bond issue, but that's how they set up those calculations.
Because I look at York and I wear the window air conditioners, just considering the fact that, and again, it is a single story facility. You don't have the 2 stories there at York, there's no upstairs. And the fact that it is a smaller square footage building than any of the others. And it also houses some of our youngest students who struggle oftentimes in the heat, little kids. Is there consideration given to looking at buildings such as that to determine whether or not those funds could at least be used in part for a facility like York?
So,
I don't expect an answer.
No, appreciate the
No, that's
input,
good.
sure.
So what you're saying is, the 400,000, I want to make sure I understand. The 400,000 that we're looking at, rather than the high school gym, music, looking at where we have kindergartners, to make sure that if possible, to make that air conditioned for their.
I was just weighing the factor on students and our youngest of students in a building that is theoretically the smallest in a single story. It would probably incur the least amount of cost. Wouldn't be inexpensive, but the least amount of cost compared to buildings that have 2 or 3 stories. I understand those are always more difficult, just like your home. The more stories you have, the more difficulty you have in cooling those buildings. But looking at young students in a building that's single story, is there consideration? Has that been examined? Has that been a discussion by the Facilities Commission? What would be the cost of having a building like that done? Because your long-term effect there would be greater, because you'd be impacting young children 178 school days a year, many of which are in the heat of the year. I just know it makes it really hard for young kids to focus.
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question.
So I will tell you, when we talked to the engineers, we talked about some of those types of things. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that the board hasn't made a decision on the master plan to know if they wanted to, how they wanted to structure the district, put it that way. Based on what we heard from the public, we don't know if we would have neighborhood schools. We don't know if we would demo every neighborhood school, build new neighborhood schools, reconstruct. And one of the things with federal money is the investment is for 5 years. So one of the considerations that we took into consideration was that when you're thinking along those lines, is that really a good place to go if we don't know what we're going to do with a master plan? I don't know. Again, that's the board's call. But, I mean, you have to think along those lines. Future thinking would be, maybe that's not the best spend. If we're going to keep the high school and that wing, at least we're not spending money to lose money and have it demoed.
John, are you saying adding air conditioning to the other single, or are you saying building new?
No, I was talking about, my question was, has the board considered, does the board have an estimate as to what it would cost to provide central air conditioning for York Elementary as a beginning point, since it is the smallest of buildings, single story, and then begin to examine.
I see, okay.
What the impact that would have versus the gymnasium. I'm not saying the gymnasium doesn't need to be done. I'm just looking at.
So outside of a second and third story, you're saying,
Right.
How about okay, I see.
Because we talked a lot, I've heard you talk a lot this evening about second and third stories. We do have single story facilities in the district, and being at least 5 years out is what I've heard before any determination can be made as to feed into a new building. That's a lot of years for a student to sit in an un-air conditioned classroom. There's at least opportunity to discuss that matter, come back to those stakeholders with a response to say it's impractical or whatever it may be, but to disregard it without examining it, I would think would be something that would not be properly due diligence on the part of the board. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of needs, and it depends who you talk to. You're right, just weighing that out. It's prudent to be discerning about what the options are, and it's all typically in the eye of the beholder too, as far as, well, what's a wise investment or not. And just figuring the investment, obviously, there's an impact in a lot of places. We can impact students in a lot of ways. And trying to gauge that investment, obviously, there's already been work done facilities committee-wise and a little bit more to get and gather, and so appreciate the feedback.
That's good.
I just think it's smart to be out in front of it, be able to answer that if people trust you in the gym and have a concern. That's why I
Sure.
say we've examined it. These are the real numbers and the reason why.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Amy, do you know, just one last question, do you know, is there data on how it affects learning for young kids versus older students?
That's not something I've specifically looked into to compare that research, but I would be surprised that research hasn't been done. So that's certainly something that I can investigate. I don't have that information for you now.
Great.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
So you all should have received copies of the contract between us and QDA. Mrs. Wentworth and I thought it would be apropos for me just to kind of review with some of you that know what a sponsorship is and some of you that are newer and may not fully understand what we do as a sponsorship. And so I'll be brief. So in order to be a community school like a QDA or a QPA, like a non-public school such as that, the state requires that the public school in that area be a sponsor to oversee those community schools to make sure that they're doing everything the right way. Financials, attendance, academics. I think it was brought about by ECOT, a few of the schools, virtual schools several years ago that were not doing it the right way, misspending state money. And so New Philadelphia, I believe 6 years ago, became a sponsor for QDA, and Mr. Brand spearheaded that as the sponsor kind of liaison. So when I came on board, I took that on, and what it entails is monthly reviews of attendance and financials of QDA and QPA, Quaker Prep Academy, monthly meetings with Dr. Verratti and Mrs. Kennedy at QDA. I usually go over to the mall and hang out with them for a little bit and chat with them, and attending their board meetings and just other state-related. I mean, there's about 6 or 7 things a month that I have to do that are requirements: collecting paperwork, reviewing their academics, reviewing their curriculums. That in a nutshell is what I do. And it's a year-round thing. The state has certain requirements due at the end of the year, certain requirements within the year. But every 3 years, we have to renew our contract and decide whether we want to be a sponsor. And we do benefit financially. We get 3% of their state funds that they get from the state comes our way. So we've decided as a district that as an admin team, as a leadership team, that this is worthy of us to continue doing. We kind of get a say with what they do, and that helps us, with our kids and the kids that go there. So that's why we are at this point. It's been 3 years. So now what you have is just that contract to renew and continue to be a sponsor of QDA for the next 3 years. I believe QPA still has 2 years left on their contract, so we will revisit it. And the last thing I'll say is, in order to renew, QDA had to go through a review process by myself and a team with Mrs. Wentworth, Sandy Moglin, who's the treasurer at Massillon, who oversees the financial piece for us as a separate entity, and Janet Makel, our special ed director. She reviews the special ed side of what QDA does. And then I did site visits where I spent an entire day working with the secretaries, a handful of the teachers. I talked to parents of kids that go to QDA and get their perspective. And I'll leave you with that they aced the review, in every way. They met all of their academic goals that they put forward. The financials are are exquisitely kept and shared with us. Dr. Verratti and Mrs. Kennedy do an excellent job of keeping updated on laws. And so it's very easy for me to say we should continue to sponsor them. And I've really enjoyed and embraced this role and working with them too. It's allowed me to grow as a leader. And I just, since they are a little bit connected to New Philadelphia City Schools, I kind of like that we get to have that oversight over what they do. So that's a small nutshell of what I do, but that's why you have that there. So my recommendation is that we continue for the next 3 years sponsoring QDA. Does anyone have any questions about what I do or specifics about what we do?
I'm just going to pop in here for a second and say when Jeff came on board, this was one of the primary responsibilities that I shifted over to him. As you remember, we kind of shifted job responsibilities a little bit. And he came in knowing very little about sponsorship or the process and quickly became an expert. And I go to him and ask him the questions now. He has really embraced the role and done a fantastic job. So really appreciate the time and effort that he has put into this and continues to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. It's a well-run entity, and the oversight and the importance of it is needed. So thank you.
We have monthly meetings with the state and talk in chat rooms with other sponsors, and it's not as easy around the state with some of those community schools. I mean, I feel like I have a great relationship with QDA and QPA and their leadership, and it's very smooth compared to what I'm hearing from other places.
Do a nice job, for sure.
To me, it's a no-brainer to continue sponsoring them. Because if we don't, then another school district would, and I just think they're, like I said, Dr. Verratti and Deb Kennedy are doing an excellent job there, so.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve the contract?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Mr. Weaver, any other discussion, questions? Please call the roll.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Superintendent's report.
Great. We have 3 different policies up for the final reading and adoption, including a revised public participation policy and the credit card and expense reimbursement policies that were up for first reading in December, and then the final reading and adoption of the school calendar for the 22-23 school year.
Motion?
I move.
Mr. Galantine, and a second?
Second.
Other questions for Ms. Wentworth? You think we could, at our monthly meetings, make kind of a general, I appreciate the weekly updates on where we're at with COVID numbers. You think we could make that one of the items under your report, just a general overview of where we're at and how that's going for us?
I would be happy to do that.
Great, appreciate it.
I can tell you, in general, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Like the rest of the state, our overall case numbers have spiked. Especially, it's taken a few days, but we're getting caught up from some of the numbers over the holidays. They were lower over the holiday weeks, and then we've our numbers were really high, ended up being last week, but if you looked at the dates, many of those came from the prior weeks. However, the number of active cases is dramatically decreasing, in part because by the time we hear about the cases, they're almost out of quarantine, and that is the period of time that they're active. So I think when I left today, or as of tomorrow morning, I think we'll have 3 active cases. Having said that, I believe off the top of my head, we had 32 or 34 new cases last week, but they come on and they come off very quickly now under the new guidelines. So they've changed the rules so many times, it's not exactly apples to apples when you're looking at the numbers, but I can certainly share with you all that data.
Well, what you just said was more behind my request than anything. It's that how often and fast the rules change. And to hear that from you, I think will be beneficial, just to know what's different this week, or today, or right now.
Certainly.
Be great. Okay.
And does anyone else have any specific questions about that probably have more information than you want to know.
I have a question about the board participation thing. I'm sorry, the public participation.
Sure.
I like the changes that are on there for sure. When a person signs up for that, do we let them know that? They have,
Let them know
they have 5 minutes, like, do we tell them that? We have 5
it's here
minutes?
for them.
Is there any way that we can like maybe just remind them or? Well, a little piece of paper that says, hey, thanks, you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, what we've done traditionally is if somebody's rambled on for 10 minutes and they're not really providing good information to us, might ask them to suggest that their time has expired.
Yeah.
And we've certainly kept better track of that 5 minutes if we have a number of people signing up for it that exceeds the 30 minutes that we're supposed to have allotted. The policy also, I believe in there, gives the board the ability to flex with how we feel. And I think that Ms. Flaherty, excuse me, I apologize. If I had to guess and we went back and watched, it probably exceeded the 5 minutes, but there wasn't anybody else here, and she needed to say what she had to say. And we can, if you guys are feeling like I'm letting it go too far sitting here, give me the high sign and we'll do that, or I feel like we'll all probably agree on whether or not we should stop it and at what point. But yeah, it's I wouldn't describe it as being arbitrary, but it flexes around based on the conditions at hand and the topics being discussed. Does that make
It's been
sense?
part of the policy, just not really enforced consistently.
Yeah.
Right, so it's almost fits into that category also of you want to be receptive to public participation. People don't understand typically when they can speak or what they can speak about, so we've tended to lax as far as enforcement, just because, hey, then you end up with, well, hey, they wouldn't even listen, they cut me off,
Yeah,
they
right.
this and that. So I think if it's in there, and maybe when we redo the form, it'd be a place to add the 5-minute deal, just so that people know that we're not just, throwing a number out.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think this revision was more the document that we had the authority to stop the meeting if someone chooses to use inappropriate language.
I'm with you.
We didn't have that before this. We could, I'm sure we could stop it, but there wasn't anything in the policy, is why the policy committee got together and decided to
That's great.
modify it. Any more questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. McMath?
Yes.
Mr. France?
Yes.
Dr. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I'd like a motion to move into executive session to discuss matters required to be kept confidential by federal law, regulations, or state statutes with no action to follow.
I'll move.
And a second?
Second.
And call the roll?
Mr. Galantine?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.